Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Start Small, Think Big podcast brought to you by Digital Meld. My name is Brad Groux, founder and CEO of Digital Meld.
I'm Lisa Talbot. I'm founder and owner of True North PM Solutions, where I help small businesses lean process their operations and add automations and AI to help stream their businesses.
We're joined again by a guest, Lisa, and Lisa has graciously joined us as our second guest after Arnold Castro, the Assistant Dean of AI. We're going to continue to have guests more frequently now that we've kind of laid the foundation on what you need to transition your business to AI, the data, the processes, those sorts of things. And so Lisa works much in the same space as we do at Digital Meld, and we thought it'd be great to get a different perspective, and you could hear many of the same conversations that we have with our clients, but from a different perspective, and we can hear the challenges she's approached as she comes across this. So Lisa, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Our goal is obviously to find approachable ways for especially medium businesses, mid-market businesses to kind of punch above their weight class, and the beauty of AI and automation is it can help do that. What are some real pain points you're seeing as you talk to clients and potential clients from that perspective of how to take that first step?
Yeah, thanks, Brad. I'm happy to be here, and I think we experience a lot of the same issues or pain points. Is that everybody wants the really shiny, most updated technology, and their systems really aren't ready. Their systems, their processes, or their people aren't ready. And so it's hard to tell them to take a step back and look at what are they actually doing when that feels like they're going backwards. And I talk with a lot of individuals that are ready to scale. They've, feel like they're kind of out of the startup phase, or they've been, in this like survival phase, and they want to start really growing and expanding. And I'm asking them to kind of slow down. And that's really hard for them to understand that to get automations and AI, it's just like data. If you put crap data in, you're going to get crap data out. Making them take a step back is probably the biggest challenge that I have, but we do have the biggest reward from that. And so trying to give them that experience, giving them examples of different clients that I've had to show those outcomes, and has been allowed me to be successful.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah. And we hear many of the same sort of things. People are very open and honest. We know AI is going to revolutionize our business. We don't know how. So let's get started. And again, I think having those conversations, setting that foundation first is correct and the right way to do that. And that kind of helps us segue into the news section, where we can talk about a couple of news stories that I think are all kind of relevant to this. A survey by Walter Kluwer has revealed that despite healthcare professionals believing generative AI can help solve industry challenges like workforce shortages and burnout, most organizations are ill prepared to fully implement those technologies. When the healthcare is an interesting space, because the healthcare has been using AI on the research space for many years, and they're way, way ahead of the curve. And so you have this dichotomy between the business side of healthcare and the research side of healthcare, and like how we utilize the AI. We've talked to a biochemical company and here in Houston, and they've been using AI for many, many years. And like they're just approaching, can we even turn on like Microsoft Copilot on the business side? And I'm not really sure how we navigate that, but the big thing is at least they're looking forward. I guess it's good to know for other listeners out there and or other business leaders that even the folks that are very familiar with these technologies are still struggling to adopt.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting from that perspective too. It's like, as a customer, what's the customer perspective too? As a patient going in, how does that impact the care that we're getting as well?
Yeah, and another news story, based out of Northwestern Medicine, has developed the first of its kind generative AI system that is revolutionizing radiology. I think we've all probably gone into radiology or gotten an MRI and taken days or weeks or months to get your results, especially post-COVID years, right? And so it's cool that they're using, like Northwestern is using these technologies to revolutionize that and make that customer service experience better. Hopefully they'll learn how to make the scheduling a little better, so you're not just sitting in a doctor's office looking at the wall by yourself for 45 minutes. But another good story of Northwestern University, again, kind of using that on the research side, but it is seeing improvements for the end customer.
Yeah. I mean, just think about like how you have to wait. You have like a procedure day. Can you get an appointment faster? Would you be able to see more people because you don't need so many radiologists? You have all the AI. So I think it will be really impactful to us when some of these medical pieces, not only from the identification of diseases and different things, but also just from the increase in time to get there.
Yeah, and another area I could see them improving upon utilizing these tools with scheduling and just gathering more data about you. And Epic is the healthcare SAP, if you will. It's the big system behind the system. And I was at an AI event here in Houston. There was a healthcare provider at one of our panel tables we were discussing. They were talking about many of these same sort of issues. And we've talked about on a past episode that like whenever some of the cutting edge home service industries like plumbers and electricians and stuff, they've learned to utilize like those notifications like, hey, we'll be at your house in 30 minutes, press yes or no if that's okay, or prepare and have those constant and iterative updates. I'm hoping we can get that in the medical industry, because that's the one area I think men specifically are very stubborn, and it takes a lot for us to go to get healthcare. I know I had nasal surgery a couple of months ago, and that probably should have had a decade prior, mainly because I just get really frustrated. I'm like, why is this taking so long? And I just walk out. So I'm hoping we can utilize these tools to, again, streamline that process. And it looks like they are, but I thought that was just a funny take to give.
But also like how for places that don't have all these availability, right? There's rural areas that don't have the medical staff. All of a sudden they have access to world known dialysis and all those things that allow for patients to receive care. And so when you have these models working, then you don't need as many doctors. So you don't need as many burnout or those things. So I think there's like a big trickle effect in how it helps all, regardless of location or even socioeconomic places in life, right?
Yeah, and that's a great point. That's one reason we kind of started this podcast. I think the more people that know about AI and utilize AI, it makes it better for the entire AI ecosystem, right? An informed user is the best user you could have, because they're going to drive the innovation. They're going to demand the change. They're going to demand the new features. They're going to come up with the new great ideas. And so that's a great point to make. That's not something that I had even really thought about. Is like the smaller doctors, and especially when we get into the economics of it all, how venture capital is coming in and taking over the smaller hospitals and stuff. That's another political topic for another day. But that is a discussion I had yesterday at the AI event as well. It's like, how do we navigate that where people are looking at the ROI and the ROI only versus like, are we actually making people's lives better? And I think so. I think it's an important conversation to have. And I think we'll have one more story here. And I think, again, kind of relevant to the discussions we've had in previous episodes many times over about the growth of AI and the constraints that we have from an infrastructure point of AI. So Meta's turned to nuclear power for AI. So Microsoft, Google, Amazon, they've all made nuclear power agreements with many different sources. Microsoft announced they're doing a $30 billion project with BlackRock regarding AI. Meta has signed into a 20-year deal to secure nuclear power to fuel its growing artificial intelligence and computing needs. And again, this is something I'm giving a presentation next week at the World Affairs Council of Houston here in Houston, where about 20% of my conversation is going to be about the power constraints and what that looks like from a geopolitical level. At this point, we're looking at nearly $1 trillion in investment from just the private sector on getting the power grid to where it needs to be. So that just hopefully just tell you about the kind of explosive growth that is happening with AI, that the private sector is opening their wallets and saying, hey, we're going to help upgrade the systems for the greater good of the populace.
Yeah. And I mean, when you think about pollution and everything else, like nuclear is pretty clean. It's cleaner than fossil fuels, but AI is definitely, I think that's something to be on the lookout, is what is the impact of the energy used, and not necessarily just the energy used, but what's the runoff. So nuclear waste has a big issue in itself. So it might be cleaner, but there's also a byproduct of it. So it's kind of one of those things where, is it the better of the worst evils? Is that how the saying goes?
Yeah. And I talked about this in the episode I recorded by myself last week. Is basically we have to hope that nuclear is the bridge to get us to the fusion power and or better renewable energy like geothermal. Because again, wind and solar basically require lithium ion batteries for storage, which is far from its own sort of thing. There's no perfect answer, I think. And right now, I had snips from Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google, speaking in front of Congress, is like, we need it all right now. And hopefully AI and generative AI and general intelligence will help us solve these other problems faster. And again, with the geopolitical aspect of it, which I don't like to get into that on this podcast because it's a technology podcast, but like, we want to beat the other side, the China's and Russia's and North Korea's, and because of the advances that will help us geopolitically. And so that's why you're seeing both the private sector and the public sector coming together on this common path. It just shows AI is driving innovation and business growth. And so this is our final news story. And so a new report from ChargeBee indicates that companies adopting AI and evolving their pricing models are twice as likely to achieve active and high growth. And this is where I'm seeing it. Everyone that we've implemented automation and AI for, they're seeing ROI for it. But I was at a Kung Fu AI event yesterday. Thanks to them for putting on a great AI leaders symposium here in Houston. If you haven't heard of Kung Fu AI, just go to kungfu.ai. They're coming up in Boston, I think, in 3 or 4 months. So if you live in the Boston area, look at that. Follow them on LinkedIn. They're just a very well-run company. But we're having a conversation. I asked, like, how do we deal with the people that only look at things from the ROI perspective? really all you can do is the information that's already shared by Gartner and Microsoft and McKinsey and company. About most companies, you see about a 60-70% return on any place where they implement AI, but try to always steer them to the ROI of increasing people's productivity and increasing people's happiness within the organization, I think. But the studies are just another indicator, and there are countless indicators showing that AI does work, but you do have to lay that foundation, and you do have to look at it from a pragmatic perspective and start with those small wins and go from there.
Yeah, I think this is going to continue to grow, and so I'm excited for it actually to see like how do we make this shift, and then how do we incorporate it. I think this is what our conversation is really kind of starting to, is like how do we get ready for it and make others ready for it, and so I think that will more to come, right?
Yeah, it does. It does basically segue perfectly to our conversation as a whole. Is the first part of that conversation is the AI hype trap, right? We all hear all the time. Overwhelming majority of the time, with like especially we work with our large organizations, so 1,000+ people, where you have a dedicated IT team of maybe 20, 30 people or plus, or your multiple locations, your global company. There's just so many silos and there's so many walls and barriers built up, and that's naturally from a security perspective, from just a geography perspective, whatever perspective. And so there's a lot, not everybody's really rowing the boat in the same direction. I think with AI, you need to. And again, the event I went to yesterday made me feel good because they echoed everything that I've been telling customers, we've been telling folks on this podcast, but it's still like, oh, okay, I'm not lying to people. It's still that relief. So the goal with AI is it has to take everybody in the same direction, and it's not going to just be owned by IT. IT may own the keys to the tools, but like how those tools are used are very specific to everyone in the organization, and what best way to use those tools for them. And so unfortunately, again, in these large organizations, many leaders are always chasing that next hype train. They're hearing something at a leadership summit or on the golf course, let's be honest. And it's like, how can we rein in those expectations and start with focused and pragmatic solutions? But much like you said, Lisa, how can we have them have a focus on the data and the processes first? I think that's the real big thing.
And the people, right?
Yeah, oh,
Like
yeah, 100%.
I think sometimes on the golf course, they don't actually know what the process is doing. They just know that it happens. So what's the A to B journey? And so I think it's really outlining what that journey is, and trying to get, it's all about change management. Even all these articles that you're talking about is about change management of people, right? Like even simple things. I mean, think about even like how your credit cards and how those has changed over the last like 3 to 5 years, from like a chip to tap to like a wallet, digital wallet. And so like how do you get your people involved? You get them on early, right? But you also have to make sure that you understand, instead of you're just saying like there's a shiny object, let's go to it. Everyone's doing it. So I'm wondering, just as we're talking, how can AI help us with our tech debt too? I mean, when we think about all the energy that's being used for AI, well, I bet a lot of it is tech debt that should be, removed and not utilized, but we're just not cleaning up because it's going so fast and so quickly.
That's the great aspect as well. You're correct. It's one of those things. As you bring on new solutions, you should be auditing your previous solutions to make sure that they're even worthwhile. Like you said, garbage in, garbage out. Like, why are we still utilizing this old system that's capturing all this data that we haven't used to date? We haven't taken the time to set up the processes and procedures to use it correctly. So maybe you just don't bring that along on the new boat. You're
Yeah.
upgrading your boat. Don't bring that along with you, and that's just a weight that's released from the entire the albatross around the necks of all your people is gone. So I think that's really the thing. And and the point I think is always start with the problem. And I said at the previous, like, start with the people closest to the problem. Again, a lot of times decisions are made in boardrooms and conference rooms when they should be made in cubicles and over coffee and over lunch. Like, how could I improve your life? I've been a manager for many years. I know you have as well. It's like that my job as a manager, I always told them my job is to clear your roadblocks. Tell me what your roadblocks are, and I do my damnedest to clear those roadblocks. And I think with AI, it's no different. It's just another way to clear the roadblocks, and hopefully not just do that, but also hype up their car so they can go a lot faster down the road as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we always in corporate America always had Gembas, right? They were supposed to happen, I think, once a month. There was like managers went and sat and did audits. They don't happen all the time, but small businesses, you don't have much wiggle room. You don't have the capacity. And so I think all those problems that don't seem as big for corporate are like big problems for smaller upcoming businesses. And I think as we talk about tech debt, it's not even that they think they have too much duplicate, like it's duplicate. So they bought an app. Remember,
Mhm.
there was an app for that.
Yep.
And so if they have a pain point, so like I would even go back a step even further from like, what's your pain point? It's like, what is really the process? Because a lot of my clients have had a pain point and they go and say, this is my pain point, and they click a Google ad that guarantees that they'll fix this pain point. Well, come out that they already have 3 apps that they're using that have those features. They just aren't, using their bandwidth and Google ads to promote that feature. And so they get a lot of duplication within even their tech load, or what they're using as their systems. And so even taking a step back and saying like, okay, that's your pain point, but why is it your pain point? Like, what happens? What is going on? Who are the players? Because then you might actually bring in 2 or 3 other people that are like, hey, I get it from that person, or I get it from this system, and I actually just like throw it out because I actually don't need it, right? Like, you're just tossing it over the fence. I remember in corporate America that happened all the time. And again, you really need to think through, what is the process, what is the outcomes, and who are the players, and then start thinking about like, this is my ideal process, or like, this is how I would like it to be, and really simplifying it even from there before adding another app.
Yeah, my co-founder, he coined this term. I'll give him credit for it at least. Like we say death by 1,000 SaaS products, right?
Oh,
Most of the time your organization already has the tools you need to solve the problem. You
mm-hmm.
just you don't come together as a team to figure that out. I was talking to my best friend was in the military, and then at this event we ran into a career military person, and they said they missed that. Like they would just dump them in the middle of the forest and say like, figure it out. Like, and
Yeah.
I think there's always been team growth exercise, and the trust falls and those things, that the cheesy corporate ones, the Office episode where they go to the lake and they have to walk on the coals and things. There's always been that, but you need to do that with your day to day life. Like you're in the foxhole with them. Like figure it out together, and just hopefully you have the leadership up the chain, like actually listening to you. The big thing is I would hope that folks are getting more emboldened to speak back and have a voice, because the beauty of this is if you learn these AI tools along with your job, you're going to become a hot commodity. You just are. And so if your company doesn't recognize that, okay, you and do everything you can, and then prove, try to prove your worth, try to prove the value of what you're trying to do. And if you can't move that ship, if you're learning these tools and you're taking the time and you're doing the right steps, I think you're going to be okay. And so just have faith in your ability to figure things out, and faith in yourself to step away. I know if you have a family and children, and like that kind of change is it's a big jump, but you spend more time with your coworkers than you do your family most of the time. And so to me, if you're not happy at work, use these tools to hopefully raise yourself up to become happier and find a place that actually cares about their people, is what I would say.
Yeah. Or just like a lot of companies now are going to unlimited PTO too. So like you get your work done, you get to have PTO, like use an AI tool to have more time, right? So like get that AI tool, use it, get your job done, and then go and have some fun, if nothing else, right? Like that's how I see it, is just tools to make things easier and make my life easier.
Yep. So that's great advice. I had actually had to pick up a Venn diagram, things that matter, things you can control, and things you should focus on. It's right in the middle. I'll insert that into the recording, but like I had that printed up over my desk, so I wouldn't go fight battles that I knew couldn't win. They're worth fighting, but I knew I couldn't win them. So why am I fighting those types of things? So that it makes sense. Like, yeah, just do your work, and then, hey, check out, go enjoy your life. Don't die for a company that doesn't really necessarily, you're just a number to them. So with that said, we'll move things more positively. Obviously, avoiding the AI hype train, like you said, the key to be able to avoid that hype train, to notice where you have those overlaps. Maybe you already have a tool that kind of does this, or maybe your data is not where to be. Process mapping without perfection.
Yeah. So a lot of my clients, that's like the first step, is like, let's do the process mapping. And it doesn't have to be pretty. We don't use an app. I've used scratch paper to a whiteboard it just has to be simple, and I just track it. I think we have this desire to say like, it happens all the time. And then we track it, and it's like, actually that only happened like 3 out of the 100 times that we did it. And so but those 3 times are really painful, to your point. Like, where are those pain points? And so those are the times when once we have that clear foundation of like, okay, here's the processes, here's the players, here's the technology that we're using, the input manuals, because that's the other thing that I found, that my clients have a lot of sticky notes. So they might have a lot of apps, but they also have a lot of sticky notes to go with those apps on what they're supposed to do within those apps. And so trying to understand the workarounds that happen within those apps too. So just mapping it out to the best of our ability. I get a lot of people that say, well, I want it to be this way. And I was like, yeah, but we're not there yet. Let's do current state, and then let's look at future state, and then we can address those gaps and see what best fits. So I think just understanding that piece, that would help with the automation and the AI tools that are going to come, just because we know where to even start and where we're going.
So true on all points. And I think the key thing here is you get whoever is involved with that process in a room to do this. Don't do it in a silo, because every single time I go through this process, we're just sitting in a whiteboard and we basically talk about what those process and what those steps is. Each process I'll be like, are there any issues with this step of the process or any way you could improve upon that? And there's just different perspectives, people, because most people live at a different point in the overall process, and so they're living with different pain points, and they don't even know the other people are suffering. And whenever they hear, it's like, oh man, I'm so sorry, if I would have known, I could have done this simple, tiny change, your life would have been so much easier. And that's the whole point. It's all about conversation, and we all talk about conversation is so easy, and we have more ways to communicate now than we've ever had in the history of humans. And we seem to always work in our silos even more, because we also have more burdens, probably from a work debt perspective, of the things you have to do in a day. Is just, we have so many tasks now compared to previous generations to do in a day, and like we're taking on more and more work, but we do have the tools to help us do that. So a great thing to start at a whiteboard, start chicken scratching on a notepad, something like that. Don't try to perfect it. Eventually you can get to where you document that process, and we'll reach the change process in another segment here in just a second. But you start small, think big. Again, sit in front of that whiteboard. It doesn't need to happen a day. It can happen over weeks and over months, depending on how difficult the process is. Start with one of the easier processes so you get a feel of the whole process. But then also use the tools. Like, again, we record all of our meetings and everything. Microsoft Copilot or Fireflies or one of the AI tools, and you record that meeting you're having, and then you can go back and chat with that if you forgot something, or you can even have it summarized for us. One thing I like to do is Microsoft Copilot. I ask it, can you summarize this? And then they're like, hey, can you create a process flow diagram for that? And what it'll do, it'll dump out JSON. I won't get into too much of it, but it's Mermaid. And then you just paste that into mermaid.live, and it gives you that process diagram. Then you can go do it in Visio or Miro or any of the other tools. So just, again, don't overthink it. Just, hey, what process is causing us issues, and let's go solve it. We've covered the avoiding AI hype trap. We've covered the process mapping without perfection. Now, the next step, I think, is your people or the prep work. The organizations that skip change management pay the price later. And Lisa, I'm sure you have some great stories and insights for that.
Coming from, a lot of Fortune 500 companies in corporate America, change was always kind of that last bit, like, oh, don't forget to, get the change management or the change plan in place. And that was always the first thing that I wanted to do, because in some cases, our change plan was really longer than the actual implementation or the development plan, right? So it's really important, the ability to work with small groups of teams now, working with small businesses. And so it's easy to get the team together because they usually are wearing many hats. But it is interesting that we find things that even when there's employees of like 5 to 10 people, that the communication is broken down of what is actually, because they're heads down trying to do the process. They are not really in discovery mode. They're in let's get done mode. Or so just taking that step back and looking at the process from those different areas, from 5 to 10 people, and having them already see like, oh gosh, this is more complex than maybe the 3 or 4 things that I do on my side. And now I see the complexity from this side. And so even just outlining that process, even if in order to keep the business running, they can't participate in maybe the strategy pieces, they've now just seen the whole process. Like that in itself is worth a lot for these teams. Then they know who the players are and the outcomes. And so always try to get people involved as much as I can within, especially like the end users too, right? Like who's going to have this at the end? Does this make sense to them? What would a customer think? So like I get to put on my customer hat and say, like, me as a customer, like how would my journey be based on this process? So including all the stakeholders is vital, even just thinking at the strategy point. So you're not even with a product or an endpoint, you're just talking about like the problem or the process piece is really important to get involved in.
No, you definitely need all the stakeholders involved, and I'd like you to do that because you don't miss any details when everybody's involved because everybody's going to have their say and again give their own viewpoints. And I think the key here is empathy. You're trying to empathize with your teammates and understand where their pain points are too. So because I'm sure you have ideas to improve their lives and they have ideas to improve your lives, and that never happens whenever you're working in a silo. And like you said, the smaller businesses seem to have worse jobs communicating because they're always putting out fires. They're wearing 4 or 5 or 6 different hats. They're not just in sales, they're in marketing, they're on all, they're in client delivery, they're in doing multiple things. And so, but you have to take the time to do this. And again, utilize these tools to help you start those conversations. Talk to ChatGPT and or Microsoft Copilot and ask, hey, I'm working on a change management process for this division or for this product or this solution. And how can I start that conversation with my team? And the team is 4 people, and it gives you a basic agenda. Again, it's just the bullet points that kind of get you started. Don't let anything be that barrier. If that's too much, then literally just sit down in a room and just record it. And you can always have that go back to revisit. Take that first step. We'd like to say, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. I couldn't run a marathon to save my life, but I know if I ever wanted to do it, it's going to take me 6 months up to 2 years of training. You go couch 5K, and then you learn how to go a little bit longer distance, and it's going to take you a long time to get to being able to run 26.2 miles. So the same thing with your journey here, and the changing your organization is not going to happen overnight, no matter how big or how small the organization is. If you're more than a solopreneur, then there's other people that need to be involved and feel respected and feel like their voice matters.
Yeah, and I've just found even from that perspective is like people aren't documenting anything, right? So even like I think we're talking a lot about like oral communication, but there's also different forms of communication that isn't being done. And I think that like AI would be a great tool for that. Document your process, have these different pieces. You could throw it all in AI, come out, have it something that you could put on a wall or laminate or have on standby for when new people come on or new processes come on. AI can help in those areas too.
Yeah, and an example of that is imagine that Lisa and I worked in the same large organization. We never actually met each other before, but we do this same kind of work just from across the United States. And that's basically what I think this is. We're both trying to drive adoption for AI and do the best we can to help people upscale and grow and learn. So before this podcast, Lisa and I had a short call, about 30 minutes. I recorded it. And so I had those transcripts. And with those transcripts, I helped it drive the agenda for this podcast. And it's giving us some bullet points and we're looking at it and referring to it, but we're really just worried about the segments. We're talking like we want to talk. But the tool certainly helped me and helped us to have a better conversation. And it certainly helped us break down barriers and walls that we wouldn't have necessarily known were there. And so just realize that from your own organization is you can start that simple and again have meaningful conversations with people you don't work with every day. And I think that's a good point, that we should just empathize with people and try. If you go in there trying to help people, not so much like trying to improve your life, I've always found that if you put good things out there, even in the workspace, it's going to come back to you exponentially better. And I don't think that's really different with these tools.
Well, and I think from that perspective too, Brad, is like there are a lot of AI tools out there. There's a lot of SaaS. Like I don't think we're all saying like you have to use these tools, right? Or this one. I think it goes to your co-founder of like the Death by SaaS. Like there are a lot of tools, and find the one that like works best for you because they all have different outcomes. They all have different ways of presenting the information. And so I think that's the benefit that I have for my customers too, is that I don't come in and say like, here, I know how to make all your processes aligned and I'm going to save you tens of thousands of dollars. Like I go in with like good intent of like, I'm going to help them. I'm going to like look at their processes, talk to their people, because I'm not an expert at what they're doing. And so I get to learn every time. And that's essentially, you can do that with AI. You can learn every time and use automation and find those pieces. And so no one's really the expert, right? Like we're all just trying to learn together and make technology work for us for the better.
Yeah, anybody who says they're an AI expert, I would immediately doubt. I
Yeah.
met a gentleman yesterday at Kung Fu AI. He's one of the co-founders of Kung Fu AI. He got his degree in AI, a degree in AI in the early 1990s. And he says,
Oh
I'm
boy.
still learning every single day.
Yeah.
And so if you say you're an AI expert, I've never liked saying I was an expert in anything. There's other times where I've put subject matter expert on my resume just to try to get the job. And I have
Yeah.
confidence in myself to figure it out. But I think you have to be humble and be willing to learn. And anybody who has it figured out in the AI space is like, it literally changes every week. That's why we have a news segment, because the news segment could change what we talked about last week. We've already had that happen several times over. And so I think that's great. You put your people first, and the overwhelming majority of the conversations we had yesterday was more about like the people are the most important aspect of all of this, because the institutional knowledge in people's heads, like you said, they're not documenting it. And the only way to get that documented and prepared for AI is getting your data ready for AI. And so the only way to do that is have those conversations and start that process.
Yeah, and AI is learning from us, right? So like it is this like give and take piece. And I agree with you about the expert, right? Like I'm not fluent in Spanish, even though I have a badge on Duolingo, right? Like it's kind of the same piece of AI. Like I can learn something new every time. Um, and be floored, right? Like, oh gosh, why didn't I do this before? Why didn't I have AI do this for me a year ago or 2 years ago? Like my life would have been so much easier. But that's the beauty of AI is now I know and now I can use it.
Yep, and I had a coffee with the young data analyst yesterday. Eli, if you're listening, this was you. So, but basically, he wanted to show me some work and make sure he was on the right path. And I told him that everything he was doing is exactly how I started in 2017. It's just different tools now. The thought process doesn't really change. Those processes don't really change. Like a sales process is a sales process. You know, selling military equipment isn't really all that different than selling cars. There's the same sort of process in like customer relations, and you need to know the things you need to do. And so like the processes and the people are what matter. And so you need to be an expert of the process and people within your organization far more than you need to be an expert with AI. Because again, AI is going to get you about 60 or 70% there by itself. And the last 20 or 30% is what makes your business tick. And nobody, I don't care how many companies I talk to, I'm never going to be able to go in a company and know how they work. I'm just not, because each one's the idiosyncrasies and the special ways of you guys do things is to that company. And most of you listening have probably worked at multiple companies in the same industry, and it's night and day of how they work. Like I worked at Shell, Chevron, and Exxon in a younger career in my life as a contract worker. All work completely different. But you do need to get your data ready for AI. And the only way to do that is have these conversations and talk to people, like we've said before, is talk to the HR department. Where's your data live? Talk to your accounting department. Where's your data live? Most of the time, the technology team is going to know what systems they're using. But even then, it's like, where's your process data? Where's your onboarding documents? Someone will have them in like their network drive. Someone will have them in Microsoft Teams. Someone will have them on their desktop. Let's be honest. And we need to bring all of that data together to help leverage AI to get the most out of that data, because that data is where your bread and butter at.
I think the data piece, though, again, you just got to get your data together just to be successful. And I'm curious, Brad, and your take on automation and AI, because I think sometimes that can get really confusing for people and thinking that if I want AI because I don't want to do this task day in and day out, but really sometimes it goes back to automation, which can have a really nice relationship with AI, but sometimes it's just, if this then that piece of automation. And I'm finding with my clients that that's really confusing. Is AI, it's like a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle isn't a square type conversation that they're having. And so I'm curious as to, are you experiencing that as well between those two, as they're so interrelated yet very different?
Yeah, and how I started my journey down this path is in 2017. I started with automation. How can I get this data from this mainframe? Every night I was working on a text dot mainframe, and they would dump it to a CSV every night, a mainframe from literally like the 1980s. And they'd dump it to a CSV to a FTP site. It's like, how can I get that to a Power BI dashboard? That's just automation. And that Eli, if you're listening, like he literally showed me he's doing the same sort of thing for his business now. He's using Google Docs and Zapier, but the same tools doing the same. I was like, dude, this is exactly how I started. You're doing exactly how I did. And then because he was like, how can I grow in AI? And I was like, well, you start with automations that way. And to me, I start with the processes, like you said, because that shows you. Just think of AI as a tool you can inject at any point of a process. Agentic AI, the people who really know what agentic AI is, and agents are just they're AI that proactively do something, where like LLMs, they react. So you ask them a question, they give you an answer. Agents will, on a schedule and or whenever a variable changes or a trigger happens, they'll go off and do something. That's automation. Business process automation is something that's been going on since the days of the Model T. And the only way where you can automate is with the processes documented, is really what it is. And I tell people not to get caught up as AI or automation, because Robert, my co-founder, has also brought this up, is like a lot of times people assume it's AI when really we're just talking about automation, but it's one and the same. They're both just trying to solve a problem. And so what problem can we do? How can we make you more efficient? And so it's more like I try to tell people to focus on the problem, not so much how we're going to solve that problem. Focus on the problem and like all the variables around that problem. And then we'll use whatever tool makes the most sense. And even again, Kung Fu AI admitted yesterday, is like a lot of the problems that customers reach out for them to solve. And again, this is a much larger company than mine or Lisa's, who echoes the same thing as us, who said sometimes it's just automation that they need. And that's okay. We hope that we help them with automation. It's going to free them up with more time. They'll have more time for AI use cases. And so they're interchangeable many, many times as people are talking about them. And just, we're talking process efficiency, and whatever tool you use is all that really matters.
Yeah, gosh, you gave me like PTSD with like macros. Do you remember? Like,
Yeah.
I remember when Excel came out with the record the macro piece where you didn't even have to like input it. You could just like show how you wanted it to go like one time and it would save. That was like magic. And what was that? Like late 90s, early 2000s, maybe? Yeah, that like shut down so many things, right? Because it just was like so advanced.
Yep. And people are still using those macros today. And so that's the thing, is a lot of the decisions you make today will be living on for decades to come. And so that's something you know. That's why your data needs to be ready. Because if you build something, you're investing in the future of your organization to invest in automation and AI. You just are. And so if you rush the foundation setting process, you're just going to be building on a shaky ground for the remainder of that. And at some point, you may have to rip the Band-Aid off and start tabula rasa, clean slate all over again. We hope you don't have to do that. And so hopefully you take the time and due diligence and are not seeking the ROI right away, because a lot of the early work, the first 6 months to a year, is dirty work. Whenever they're building a new skyscraper, the first 2 years, it doesn't even look like they've done anything, right? But they're laying that foundation. They're building those pillars and piers that's gonna, and they're building the parking garage and all the things under it, and then all of a sudden you start to see the beams going up, and it just goes faster and faster and faster. Think of AI and automation much the same way. You need to lay that foundation with your data and your processes, and then you can build on it from. So I guess from the key from that is, like, after you have your data where it needs to be and your processes where you need to be, and you've talked to the people in your organization and you want to solve the problems nearest to them, and you want to look for those, picking the right pilot projects and finding that low-hanging fruit to give momentum. I recommend, at least, I'll let Lisa answer for herself, but like not starting with the hardest problem to ever solve. Because if you never actually leave the couch, you're never going to run a marathon, right? So like, get up off the couch and walk to the mailbox kind of thing. And kind of brought it up, but the perfect way to start there is utilizing these off-the-shelf tools to make your lives easier, from recording meetings and getting insights from your meetings. And whether that's Microsoft Copilot or Firefly or any other tools, that's a great way to start. I'm sure Lisa has some examples as well.
Yeah, I think that it also gives people momentum, right? So when we talk about that change management, if you can show just even saving 1 minute or one pain point, sometimes just like to your example, like recording your meetings now, you're removing like that whole admin task of sending notes or doing next steps, right? Like that takes time not only in the meeting, but also afterwards. And so now you're shortening your meetings, and then you're shortening your follow-up pieces because it's collecting it all together. And so I think that's an awesome example. In addition, I think when we also talk about just inclusivity, and so a lot of times a lot of these will have transcript, and so like how people retain information is different. By using AI, you're actually helping your employees retain the information better and understand it, and so that you're on the same page. Again, trying with that change management perspective and getting your people and your data where they are. So I completely agree, is like the lowest hanging fruit. It's always that, if I go back to my project management, it was like, what's the least amount of work but biggest effort? So like, or biggest outcome, so that it just builds that momentum. People are like, oh yeah, like, oh my gosh, we now have 30 minutes because we don't have to have an hour meeting. Like, okay, now what can we do? And so you're actually building the celebration and the excitement as you go and you start doing these things. And actually you'll start to find that maybe I had a client that we got to like their big pain point, and it actually wasn't the same pain point anymore once we did these different steps, because it just didn't exist to the capacity that it was, because we changed these other areas and the people involved actually had capacity to do something different that changed kind of the process in itself. And so sometimes you actually, where you start and where you end up are very different. Obviously, if you're running the marathon, I hope that you do come back home, but when you're doing the little steps, it can change how the whole project goes.
You started it off really great. Wins build momentum, and you can't try to solve everything at once. And I have a real problem with this because I'm a engineer at heart, so I think 150 steps ahead, and I have ADD, so that's just one of those things too. But like, you have to, again, what's the meaningful change that you can happen? If you don't know where to start, talk to your users again. Get a list of all the main pain points. What I like doing are lunch and learn sessions. So we go to a client and we bring in people from all over the company, and we're like, what are just some pain points? And we'll just get out Post-it notes and we'll write those pain points. And you'll notice people will have similar pain points across departments,
Mhm.
across divisions. And again, they're not knowing that until you like, hey, buy them lunch. It's going to cost you a couple $100 to buy lunch for 20 or 30 people. Invite them in a room and literally have those conversations, and invite the people that you know are go-getters who are trying to drive change, who are open to change too, as long as they can see the benefit of that. It would be my number thing. And so choosing those right pilot projects is so important. You only have, one chance to make a good first impression. That's an old saying for a reason, right? And I think with technology, people are so turned off by technology failures. One of my favorite products in the world is SharePoint. And if I tell people that, like, oh my God, SharePoint, that's the worst, it's because SharePoint for 15 years had the worst rollouts of all time across all organizations, because you needed to have 20 people together to work together to roll that out perfectly. Now with SharePoint Online, that's much easier. How many SaaS products have people rolled out and that nobody ever uses, and they don't use 10% of it? And the only way you do that is because you're not setting those change management processes, like you said, Lisa. You're not documenting those processes to know how can we get the most out of this tool. And so before even looking to a SaaS product, go through those processes, because you're just wasting money, and wasting time, and like wasting capital within your organization from your users. Again, they're going to be stuck in their ways though, if the more and more failed products you put in front of them. But with that said, don't accept every pilot product you roll out, because if you're not, then your acceptance criteria and your change management process you built probably not where it needs to be. So, but building momentum is very key.
And also, you can, in those lunch and learns, you can find those people that are excited about it, and you maybe just take them, and then all of a sudden you make their pain point not existent, and they can start kind of helping you with that change piece too. So even if you don't get a group after a lunch and learn, or after a big, we used to call them road shows, you can find those individuals that are ready for it, or want to at least experiment with it, and work with them. And then all of a sudden they're kind of echoing what you're saying, right? Like, hey, this really worked, I have all this time, or I did this. And they can kind of get their friends, right? Bring your own friends to to our AI experiment.
Yeah, a good leader will always notice the people that are eager to improve and drive change. There's a reason people are promoted through the ranks in military, right? Because the leaders see that they see something in this younger person, or person with less experience, or person that's kind of been overlooked and overpassed. Maybe the AI space is something that they could be passionate about, and they look at in their own time, because it is very exciting for people who care about the future of humanity. So I talk to people all the time who have no aspirations for technology work, but they gobble up as much AI information as they can, because of the geopolitical aspect of it, because of how it could help humanity, because of the space race, and name any number of issues. Like, it's just exciting technology, just like the internet was. Like my 73-year-old mother, she'd probably be embarrassed I say that, like, she has kind of an internet addiction, because like she has the ability to go on Facebook and talk to her friends from 50 years ago, and like keep track of everybody. So there are going to be people that you wouldn't necessarily know would have like a passion for this. And so the only way you figure that out is talking to people. And where I always start with automation with an organization, I always start with the receptionist, because if I impress the receptionist and help the receptionist, everybody's going to hear about it. And that you're looking for champions, you're looking to impress one or two people, or gain the support of one or two people, and then let them go spread the gospel for that. Yeah, somebody mentioned it yesterday, basically, and I made the joke. It's like we're creating the cult of AI.
Yep.
We're trying to convince people that AI is not a boogeyman. AI is going to make our lives better. And of course, there's going to be some folks that are left behind, but that's the way it's always been. Whenever we moved from pencil and paper and typewriters to keyboards and mice and computers, like, people were left behind. But a good leader, and we have the tools to help upskill those people. So again, getting those pilot projects off right is really important, and the only way you do that is talking to folks. Cool. Well, I think this has been a great conversation, Lisa. Thank you so much for being involved. This actually flew by, because I think we took that prep work, we used the tools, we dog fooded, as I like to say, it's a Microsoft term. So we use the tools that we recommend you to use to help us have this conversation. And so I think this went pretty naturally. I'll let Lisa speak for herself, but like, I think this felt like a great conversation. While I think a lot of that has to do with Lisa specifically, and her experience and her breadth of knowledge, I think a lot of it is we're comfortable working with these tools, and trusting these tools and help guiding it. And I think you can be too. But trust but verify always. We're going to keep you human in the loop for at least many more years. So there's always going to be a human in the loop, I think, at some point to drive successful things. And so I'll summarize it with a few takeaways, and I'll leave Lisa a few minutes. And but don't start with AI. Start with understanding. I think that's the overarching the overarching theme of this episode, like talk to your people, understand your processes way before we even talk about the solution that you can do. And that includes prepping your people, map your processes, and assess your data maturity. Those are the three core tenets, I think, of any adoption within your organization, not just AI adoption. That's automation adoption. That's new SaaS product adoption. That's, rolling out a new division or going through a merger and acquisition process. It's all, you need all of those things for all of those. So, and if you fix your systems, AI, just look at AI as a force multiplier. It's going to make you more efficient. And the people that are doing a really good job and utilizing AI are always going to be the differentiator between the people just doing their jobs really well. Like it just gives you the ability. I think we say all the time that the easy tasks become automated, the hard tasks become easy, and the impossible tasks become doable. And I think that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. Thanks for having me today. I've learned so much from you just in our short time together and in this conversation. And I definitely have some nuggets just to think about, even in my own experience. And I would just like to iterate, I think that it can be intimidating to start. So if you've been on the sidelines, I think, oh, I missed the wagon for AI is not something that's true. Like, get on the wagon, start working, asking ChatGPT or whatever one you want to start with. And just start asking. I think that will just get you more comfortable with them and see what they're actually capable of. And even just like my prompts and things, I change them and I'm like, oh yeah, I should have asked that before and I would have gotten a better outcome. Don't be afraid. It's not too late to get on the AI bandwagon or our cult. Are we creating a cult now of AI, I guess?
Throw with it.
And we're always just learning. So learn with us. And I think that that's the key piece, is that you're always learning and always upskilling regardless of what industry you're in. So that's really important. So thanks, Brad, for having me. I appreciate the conversation. And again, my company is just True North PM Solutions, and you can find me on LinkedIn and on the internet. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, and again, we'll have all the links to Lisa and her company in the show notes. We have a newsletter also that comes out on LinkedIn every Monday, and so they'll all be there. So if you need to find that, just go to linktree.com/digitalmeld. That's a link to all of those. Our newsletter's right at the top of that, and then it'll give you access to Lisa's business. If you need help or have questions, I know I'm just going to speak for Lisa here. She'll be happy to answer those, as I will. I think we love being evangelists more than we actually probably love driving solutions. We love talking to people and helping people, and I think I'm finding that, especially after my thing with Kung Fu AI yesterday, that I am having faith in humanity again, because the doom and gloom for AI is very easy to talk about. And we've talked about some of those things, like it's going to cut white collar jobs. But for the most part, like everyone I talk to is like, this is just going to free up so much more time and do so much more good. And I think what you brought up is like being a lifelong learner is very important. I will never tell anybody I'm an AI expert, because it's just changing too often. I'll do my best. I'm trying my best to be an AI expert, I'll say. But it's just changing. I know the core tenets of AI, but like the new tools and how to use it. The truth is, how to use AI is based around your business. You know better how to use AI in your company than I ever will. That's just the truth. And so to me, that makes you the AI expert. You just don't know enough about the tools yet, and that allow us to help you do that. And so we thank you for joining us on this journey. I hope you look forward to joining us next week, where we're actually going to be having another guest on. So thank you, Lisa, for unleashing the floodgates for that. We're going to be featuring Raj Singh of Mozilla. So someone who's sold 4 different companies off and now works for Mozilla. And he's a VP at Mozilla. And I think we're going to be helping teams adopt AI without the hype. So much along these same sort of lines. And he's talking about it from the startup sector, but also from the enterprise sector as well. Not just talking about how it's adopted by the business as a whole, but how can you convince those people to change their way of thinking within your team, is how we're going to have that next week. And so we thank you again for joining us on this journey, and hope you keep tuning in. And please reach out to Lisa, and I'm sure she would love to connect with you on LinkedIn. And so thank you, Lisa, again for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, and everybody, until next week, we'll see you later. Bye-bye. We want to hear about your AI and automation journey, and we'd love for you to get involved with Start Small, Think Big. If you'd like to participate or offer feedback, please reach out to us anytime via email at contact@digitalmeld.io, or use the contact form on our website, digitalmeld.io/contact. Also, please help spread the word by liking, subscribing, and sharing our podcasts on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks.